there was a building built on the corner right across from Anthus store in 1908, and it was called the Olympic Club. And it was built and funded by townsmen. Ed Howard and a number of other businessmen in town put up the funds, and they built this at the urging of a Seattle promoter, Mr. Baker, who wanted to bring people to the island to have sporting events, boxing, wrestling matches, billiards, and so forth. And he promised thousands of people would come and business would boom, and he would buy the building once it was erected. So on Labor Day in 1908 was the big opening. They had hired boats, brought people from Everett and from Seattle. The big stern wheelers and the side wheelers came. And the promoter had lined up a very professional boxer and a billiard player, and they were going to hold exhibitions in this place. The townspeople had put out tables on First Street with food and so forth, and it was a big deal. And then a problem arose. The promoter had given away so many free tickets, he didn't have enough money to pay the purse of the professional boxer and wrestler, and one of them wouldn't get off the boat. He didn't have enough money to pay the boat captains, so the boats left and stranded all these people here. People were asleep on the beach, they were put up in the hotel and people's homes, and it took a whole day to get more boats over here the next day and get all the people back. And so for many years, Langley had a very bad name because of that experience, apparently. So after the Olympic Club fiasco, the promoter never bought the building, and so the people who in town were sort of stuck with it. Hugh MacLeod actually moved his law office into there while he worked out all the financial details and so forth. And then in October of 1910, Anthus store burned, and arson was suspected or was known. When Anthus had left town in 1908, he had either leased or sold his store to a man by the name of Nelson. Anthus thought that he had set fire to the building for the insurance money. He didn't realize that when Anthus left town, he had canceled his insurance because he thought that the stream running by his house would be sufficient to put out any fire that would start. This was a big change in town. That big building was burned, and that whole vacant lot was there for 25 years or so. Then, for some reason which isn't quite clear, a few weeks later, Ed Howard's store across the street also burned under suspicious circumstances. So Ed Howard moved his store and his post office and his family into the Olympic Club. And he renamed the building the Langley Mercantile and General Store. And he had his son, Fred, run it with two Hunsaker brothers, Walter and Bob, and they ran it for a short period of time, for a couple of years, until 1915, when Bob decided he wanted to go to Alaska, and so they got out of the businesses that they were in, and Ed Howard turned the building into what he called Howard's Confectionery.
I can't remember if it was a tavern at the time. I think it was still a tavern in the back, but the front part you could go in and buy candy and things like that.
And it was Howard's Confectionery until 1937, when Ed Howard's son, William, and his wife, Vella, who had run the confectionery for a number of years, when William died, his wife renamed the building the Doghouse Tavern in 1937, and it's been the Doghouse Tavern since. So here you had essentially a three-story building. There was a stage upstairs, which was used for boxing matches over the years. The high school graduation exercises were held up there.
To have boxing up there, and I think they even had movies earlier.
The basement was set up as a gymnasium, and there were showers down there with no hot water. The ceilings were, I think, something like 12 feet high, so they weren't very high. And when they played basketball in there, the knowledgeable players would careen the ball off the ceiling down into the basket. They had billiard tables in the back, and in 1919, one of Ed Howard's daughter-in-laws gave birth on a table or somewhere in there. The story is on a pool table. I'm not sure that that's true. They had little benches along the back walls because there were card games that would go on all night, and guys would lie around on these benches and catch a little nap and then come back and re-enter the game. In one of those card games, a man by the name of Darrell Scott, who owned Baby Island, was a pretty good pool player, billiard player apparently, but not a very good card player. At any rate, he lost the title, the deed to Baby Island, in a card game in the back of the tavern.
You know, Baby Island, at low tide you could walk to it, and at high tide it was an island. You know, it's still out there now. It's eroding, but there was this resort on Baby Island. Island County, Whidbey Island, was a dry county. There were areas across the water in Everett that weren't. So there was a bit of traffic back and forth. There was also a common thing during the 1920s where dance halls had been constructed in local communities. Glendale had a pavilion, Possession had a pavilion. There was a history of rum running that was occurring. Cheap rum was coming from Canada by boat into the Puget Sound and would end up in these little communities where dance halls were.
During Prohibition, if you had a social gathering, you could serve alcohol, apparently. And so there was something called a blind pig. You could invite people over to look at the blind pig, apparently, and serve alcohol because this was a social event. Downtown has been rearranged by fire. The Anthony's store was the first one to go, and then Ed Howard's store shortly thereafter. And then in 1921, the big hotel burned. And so the only building of the four corners of Anthus and First Street, that anchoring corner where the town actually started, the only building that's left of those four is the Doghouse. And so I'm hoping that that will be renovated, remodeled in some way, but preserved as one of the unique old structures of early Langley.